On November 3rd, I want to say happy birthday to the Times of India. One of the best, as well as one of the largest circulation English language daily in the world. It was founded on November 3rd of 1838. At that point, it was the Bombay Times and Journal of Commerce, and you couldn't have a more Victorian English name. Nor in many ways could you have a more characteristically English institution than the Times of India. And that's a remarkable reflection of the impact that the West has had on the world. These days, we may all be watching in horror as the United States prepares finally not to elect Donald Trump, but only at the price of electing Hillary Clinton. It's an American election, and sure, the United States is important, but it's not just important because of its military power. It is in a very real way at the center of world civilization. New York has been the capital of the world for probably the last 100 years, and everybody has an opinion on the American election, no matter where they are, if they follow public affairs. Well, in the 19th century, it was Britain. And again, not just the Royal Navy or what Queen Victoria might be up to, but this whole question, where do you stand on the subject of Western civilization? You may love it, you may hate it, but if they've got newspapers, you've got to have a newspaper, even if only to oppose Western civilization by writing stinging editorials and exposés. And yet, of course, in the very act of founding a newspaper, whether you're doing it because you say you love Western civilization or because you say you hate it, you're becoming a part of it. There's a book that I've talked about on a number of occasions, including in some of my It Happened Today pieces. It's called The World Revolution of Westernization by Theodor von Laue, who was originally a scholar of Soviet and Russian affairs. But from the perspective of seeing what the West had done to Russia, I don't mean in a malevolent and active spirit, but by the incredible power of its example and the constant reproach, why aren't you like that if your culture is so great? He started to see that throughout the world, there was this extraordinary problem that confronted people after about 1500 as Europe began its voyages of discovery and colonizing. And it was this. A lot of people in the world didn't like Western culture. They didn't like the individualism. They didn't like what they saw as chaos, what we see as dynamism. They didn't like the fact that people were not stuck in the place in life they were born into. They didn't like the fact that it wasn't stagnant. And yes, it can be alarming. I grant that it has its hair-raising moments. At times, Marx's complaint that all that is solid melts into air seems to me all too pertinent. But people wanted to fight off the West, and they found that the military contest was incredibly unequal. And it wasn't just a matter of the force of arms. It was, again, the power of this dynamic culture behind the weapons, the spirit of free inquiry, of social mobility, that created the economic might of the West and its armies of citizen soldiers able to think for themselves, to follow orders without being rigid, to improvise without discipline breaking down. What has all this to do with a newspaper? Well, again, a newspaper is a characteristic Western and especially Anglosphere institution in which questions are raised, in which issues are broached, in which there are very few taboos and things are discussed frankly. Now, it happens that India reacted exceptionally well to Western imperialism. Not that there weren't things like the Indian Mutiny, and not that it didn't have some justification. But on the whole, India has made a successful transition to being an open society, and it's not surprising that they would have such high quality as well as mass circulation English language dailies as particularly the Times of India. But it's also a mark of the fact that you can't keep them on the farm when they've seen Paris, and it's no good railing against Western culture because in so many ways, a society that is dynamic because it respects individual rights is obviously the proper way to arrange your affairs. When even its enemies have to imitate it, you realize it's a lot better idea to be one of its friends, to preserve what is valuable about your traditional culture, but without stifling the kind of opportunity, the kind of openness, the extraordinary room there is for people to breathe and live in a society that is based upon the primacy of the individual. And it's because India took to that so readily that they would have such a first-rate newspaper. So happy birthday, Times of India. The world revolution of Westernization came to Bombay and to the subcontinent, and it was, never mind what people say about imperialism, it was an almost unmixed blessing that it did so. If you've enjoyed this feature, please do keep watching. Visit my website, that's johnrobson.ca. You'll find our documentary work there, the blog posts, the other kinds of commentary. There is a donate button. Please support our work. And also, of course, keep watching and backing the Rebel.